The millionaire tests his new maid by leaving the safe open, secretly recording her actions. Everyone knew Logan Carter was the kind of man, but few truly understood. At 46, he had built an empire that stretched across the world's financial hubs. Yet his personal life remained as silent as the luxurious townhouse he called home, situated in the city's heart. The grand residence was a symbol of his success, but it was also a reflection of the loneliness he refused to acknowledge. Logan was always in motion: board meetings, business trips, and negotiations that never seemed to end. He glided through life with confidence, leaving little room for self-reflection. Like an arrow aimed only at the next target. The media praised him, and society envied him. But Logan's life was governed by strict order. And in that order, there was no space for attachment or vulnerability. People often asked him how he managed to balance everything so flawlessly on the rare occasions he agreed to interviews. Logan would smile, practice calmly, and talk about time management, discipline, and focus. What he never mentioned, though, was how empty it all sometimes felt, especially when the lights went out and the endless hum of the city quieted down. One evening, after a long flight back from Switzerland, Logan returned home expecting everything to be as pristine as always. But something was different this time. His longtime maid, Nancy, met him at the door, her face lined with an expression he hadn't seen before. She had been with him for over 8 years, a constant presence in his life, though he never gave her much thought beyond her duties. "Mr. Carter," she said, calm but firm, "I need to talk to you about something important." Logan set his briefcase down, already sensing the shift in the air. Nancy explained that her children were moving away from the city to live by the sea, and they wanted her to join them. She spoke about her desire to spend time with her grandchildren and to be there for her daughter-in-law, who was expecting her first child. Logan listened, his face impassive. "I understand," he said after silence, though choosing family over duty was foreign to him. To Logan, family was just another complication, another source of disorder in the otherwise carefully constructed world he had built for himself. He generously paid Nancy, thanking her for her years of service, and immediately called his secretary, Sophia, to arrange a new maid. Sophia, efficient as ever, wasted no time. The next day, Logan was introduced to his new maid, Claire. She was nothing like Nancy Young, soft-spoken, and as plain as could be. Her modesty bordered on invisibility, an old gray sweater that seemed too big, a simple black skirt that fell below her knees, and a pair of worn-out shoes that looked like they had seen better days. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and her large, shy eyes hid behind a pair of glasses. Logan studied her with cool detachment as she fidgeted nervously, clutching the strap of her bag. She seemed uncomfortable under his gaze, but that didn't bother him. It was precisely what he wanted, someone who wouldn't draw attention, who would do her job without asking questions or getting too comfortable. "You'll do," he said, his tone brisk and final. Claire nodded, murmuring her thanks in a barely audible voice before disappearing into the house to start her duties. Logan watched her leave, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Sophia had done well. This girl was just what he needed, uncomplicated, discreet, and forgettable. But Logan, ever the cautious businessman, wasn't one to take people at face value, no matter how unassuming they appeared. He decided to test Claire to see if her modesty was genuine or just an act. After all, appearances could be deceiving, and Logan trusted no one completely. Before leaving on another business trip the following day, he set a trap in his office, hidden behind layers of glass cabinets and locked drawers. Logan kept a small fortune in cash. On this occasion, however, he left one of the safes slightly ajar, enough for someone to notice if they were curious enough. Inside, he placed a bundle of large bills, deliberately arranged so that any tampering would be evident. Satisfied with his preparations, Logan activated the surveillance cameras in the office and left for the airport. As his private jet took off, he felt a sense of cold detachment, already anticipating the maid's failure. It was, after all, human nature to give in to temptation. He just needed to see how long it would take. 2 days later, Logan returned. The house was spotless, the floors gleaming, and the air smelled faintly of lavender. Claire had done her job perfectly. Still, Logan headed straight to his office, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. Everything appeared in order. The safe was still slightly open, and the money was untouched. He almost felt a sense of relief. But Logan couldn't make decisions lightly. He poured himself a drink, sat before the surveillance monitor, and fast-forwarded through the footage. Claire appeared on the screen, going about her tasks quietly and efficiently. There was nothing unusual, nothing out of place, until there was. After finishing her usual cleaning routine, Logan watched as Claire walked back into the office dressed in her street clothes, her gray sweater and dark blue jeans. She hesitated in the middle of the room, glancing around nervously. Logan leaned forward, his grip tightening on the arm of his chair. What was she up to? For a long moment, Claire stood there, seemingly lost in thought, before her eyes landed on the bookshelf. She approached it cautiously, running her fingers along the spines of the old, dusty books. Logan's heart rate quickened. Was she planning to take something? Steal a valuable book? But to his shock, Claire didn't reach for a book. Instead, she pulled out an old photo album Logan had nearly forgotten about. She flipped through the pages quickly, as if searching for something specific. Then she stopped, her fingers lingering over a particular photograph. Logan's breath caught in his throat. What was she doing? Claire carefully pulled the photograph from its place, looked at it for a moment, and then, to his astonishment, slipped it into her pocket. Logan couldn't believe his eyes. Anger boiled inside him. Why would she steal a photograph? Of all things. Why that? And what did she want with his past? Logan turned off the monitor, his face set in a stern expression. This girl wasn't as innocent as she appeared. Tomorrow, he would confront her, and he wouldn't rest until he got the needed answers. The following day, Logan woke before the sun, his mind already replaying the events from the surveillance footage. He showered quickly, dressed in his usual crisp suit, and headed to the office where his secretary, Sophia, greeted him with her usual efficiency. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said brightly. "Is there anything I can assist you with today?" Logan didn't hesitate. "Call the new maid. I need to speak with her in my office immediately." Sophia raised an eyebrow, sensing the tension in his voice. But she nodded and made the call. Within an hour, Claire timidly knocked on the office door. "Come in," Logan called, his voice sharp. Claire stepped inside, looking nervous, her hands fiddling with the strap of her bag as she approached his desk. Logan crossed his arms, his gaze cold and unyielding. "Sit down," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Claire sat down slowly, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "Tell me," Logan began, his voice cutting through the silence. "Which newspaper do you work for?" Claire blinked in confusion, her brow furrowing. "Newspaper? I don't understand." Logan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Don't play innocent. I saw everything. There was a camera in the office." Claire's face drained of color. She glanced down at her hands, the room filling with a heavy silence. "You mean the photograph I took from the album?" she asked quietly. "Exactly." Logan's voice was filled with frustration. "Why did you steal it? What are you planning to do with it?" Claire looked up at him, her blue eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read. Was it guilt? Fear? Or something deeper? She didn't answer for a moment, and Logan felt his patience slipping. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I took it because it shows you with my mother." Logan stared at her, his mind struggling to process her words. "Your mother," he repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. Claire nodded, biting her lip nervously. "Yes, the woman in that photo is my mother. Amelia. She told me about you." The name hit Logan like a punch to the gut. Amelia. Memories long buried began to resurface. And for a moment, Logan felt as if he had been transported back in time to a version of himself he thought he had left behind. He closed his eyes, letting the images flood his mind. 22 years ago, Logan had been a young man, fresh out of university and determined to make something of himself. He came from an ordinary family with no connections or wealth. But he had ambition, which was enough for him. He remembered the first time he saw Amelia, a stunning woman with fiery red hair and eyes as blue as the sky. She had been working as the assistant to the director of a logistics company where Logan had applied for a job. When their eyes met, Logan knew he had to be with her. He mustered the courage to ask her to lunch. In his surprise, she accepted. A whirlwind romance followed, dinners at fancy restaurants, late-night conversations about their dreams, and endless days spent laughing together. Logan had fallen in love, deeply and completely. He had even introduced Amelia to his family, and they adored her. Everything had been perfect until it wasn't. Logan had been offered a career-defining opportunity, a chance to manage an overseas branch of a major company. It was the kind of offer he couldn't refuse. But it meant postponing their wedding and leaving Amelia behind for a while. He had hesitated, but Amelia had encouraged him to go, insisting they could wait a few months for the wedding. Logan left, believing they would reunite soon. But life had other plans. 2 weeks before the wedding, he received a message from Amelia, cold and final. She had met someone else and had fallen in love with him. Logan was devastated, but he buried the pain instead of focusing on his career. He had never seen or heard from Amelia again. Now, sitting across from Claire, Logan felt the weight of those years pressing down on him like a heavy stone. "You're saying Amelia is your mother?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Claire nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Yes, and she told me you're my father." Logan felt the air leave his lungs. Father. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had shut that part of his life away for years, never allowing himself to think about what might have been. And now, sitting before him, this girl told him she was his daughter. How is that possible? Logan asked, his voice trembling. "I didn't know." Claire bit her lip, her hands shaking slightly. "My mother never told me the full story until I found her diary. She told me that you left before she could tell you she was pregnant. She wanted to wait for you to return. But when you didn't, she thought you had forgotten her." Logan felt a surge of pain. Need to remember her? He had always remembered Amelia. How could he? But then, he remembered the message, the one that had shattered his heart all those years ago. Could it have all been a misunderstanding? Had something gone wrong? Something he never knew about? "I don't understand," he whispered, more to himself than to Claire. But one thing was clear, he needed answers. He needed to know what had happened all those years ago. And there was only one person who could give him those answers. "Where is she?" Logan asked, his voice quiet but determined. "Where is Amelia?" Claire hesitated for a moment, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "She's home," she finally said. "But I didn't tell her I was working for you. She doesn't know I came to find you." Logan felt his pulse quicken. Amelia, after all these years, the woman he had once loved more than life itself. The woman who had broken his heart and disappeared from his world. She was still out there, living her life without him. And she was the mother of his daughter. He didn't know what to think or how to feel. "We need to see her," Logan said, his voice low but determined. "I need to talk to her. There's too much we don't understand." Claire nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I don't know how she'll react, but I think she needs this as much as you do." They drove in silence, Logan's mind racing with thoughts about what would happen. When they arrived at Amelia's house, Logan felt a strange mixture of anticipation and fear. The house was modest, tucked away in a quiet suburb far from the bustling city center Logan had grown used to. It was a world apart from the life he had built for himself. Claire led the way, and they stood at the door. "Mom," Claire called softly as they stepped inside. "It's me." Logan heard movement from the other room, and then he saw her. "Amelia." She walked in, her eyes softening as she saw Claire. But when her gaze shifted to Logan, everything changed. Her face paled, her hand flew to her mouth, and she stood frozen, staring at the man she had once loved. "Logan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the past between them like a thick fog. Logan's throat felt tight, his mind struggling to make sense of the flood of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to think for years. Regret, pain, confusion. But most of all, a deep, aching sense of loss. I came for answers, Logan said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't understand what happened between us. Why did you leave? Why did you send me that message? And why do you never tell me about Claire? Amelia's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she shook her head, her voice trembling. Logan, I didn't leave. I didn't send you any messages. I thought you left me. I thought you didn't want me anymore. Logan felt the ground shift beneath him. What? But the message, you said you met someone else. You said you fell in love with another man. Amelia's eyes widened in shock. No, I never sent any message like that. I waited for you. Logan, I waited to tell you that I was pregnant. But when I couldn't reach you, I discovered you blocked my number. I thought you had moved on. Logan's mind spun, trying to piece together the fragments of the story. Blocked your number? He repeated, the confusion in his voice evident. I didn't block you. I called you every day. And when I couldn't reach you, I thought you were the one who moved on. Amelia gasped softly, the color draining from her face. I lost my phone around that time. I didn't think much of it when I found it again. But what if someone else? Her voice trailed off, and they both turned toward Claire, who had been standing quietly in the corner. Claire's face was pale as realization dawned on her. It must have been Sophia, she whispered. My aunt, she never liked you. Mom, she always thought you deserved better. That Logan wasn't good enough. What if she took the phone, sent those messages, and ensured you were kept apart? Logan's heart sank. He remembered Sophia, Amelia's younger sister. She had always been cold toward him, dismissive even, but he never imagined she would go to such lengths. The betrayal felt fresh. Even after all these years, Amelia shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. It all makes sense now. She must have wanted to sabotage us, to keep us from getting married. Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her heart as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear. Logan took a deep breath, his mind racing. But why? He asked softly. Why would she go to such lengths to keep us apart? Amelia looked at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. She was jealous of what we had, of how much I loved you. The room was thick with emotion, the weight of years of misunderstandings, heartbreak, and lost time pressing down on them. Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. Mom, I'm sorry. Dad, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know the truth. Logan felt something break inside him at the sound of that word, Dad. It was the first time she had called him that, and it struck him deeply. Logan moved toward Amelia, his hand reaching for hers. She hesitated momentarily before taking it, her fingers trembling as they intertwined with his. I'm sorry, too, Logan whispered. I'm sorry for everything, for not fighting harder to find out what happened, for not being there for you, for Claire. Amelia shook her head, a sad smile forming on her lips. We both made mistakes, Logan, but we have a second chance now, don't we? Logan nodded, tears pricking his eyes. Yes, we do. Claire stepped closer, and the three stood together, united in the truth they had uncovered and the future they now had the chance to build. Logan looked at his daughter, a girl he had never known existed, and felt deeply grateful for the opportunity to be in her life. I want to be there for you, Claire, Logan said softly, his voice filled with emotion. I want to make up for all the years we lost. If you'll let me. Claire nodded, her eyes filled with tears. I've always wanted a father. I just never thought I'd find him like this. Amelia looked between them, her heart swelling with emotion. You have us now, and we have each other. As they stood there, the weight of the past finally lifted, replaced by the hope of the future. Logan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still wounds to heal, time to make up for, and relationships to rebuild. But for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to think in a long time. Hope. The three of them sat down, talking late into the evening, sharing stories, memories, and plans for the future. Logan realized how much he had missed out on, but also understood that it wasn't too late. He had found his family again and was determined to hold on to them. As the night drew close, Logan looked at Amelia and Claire, his heart full. He had spent years chasing success, But now he had found something far more valuable: love, family, and the chance to make things right. "I'm not going anywhere this time," Logan said quietly, his eyes meeting Amelia's. "I'm here. For both of you." And for the first time in decades, Logan Carter allowed himself to dream, not of business deals or success, but of a life filled with the people who truly mattered. A life where he could finally be the man and the father he was always meant to be.